What's up, friends? So today we got quite an amazing show to go over. A show that hasn't really been talked about too much, hasn't really been circulating in the media so much, but it has won quite a few awards, and I would say it's most definitely one you should be checking out. Today we're going to be reviewing the Mare of Easttown. Mare of Easttown is a brand new 2021 HBO original show that has a total of 1 season with 7 episodes, and each episode is around 58 minutes in length, so about an hour. So Mare of Easttown follows the story of Mare, who is a police detective living in the town of Easttown, who's essentially following and trying to solve a brutal murder that occurred in the woods that may or may not be connected to a kidnapping that occurred a year back, an unsolved kidnapping that's been plaguing this town and has been causing a lot of issues altogether. Now, I can explain the story a little bit more, but essentially that's all you need to know about it. So starting off with if it's engaging or not, this mystery will keep you glued. I mean, the mystery itself, aside from any characters, aside from the world, the mystery itself, it's so engaging in that it's not straightforward in any way possible. Right when you think you feel like you know the answer, it turns a whole nother way. Right when you feel like you finally got a clue that might give you insight into what happened, what went down, why a character acted the way they did, it's actually quite the opposite. Nothing in this show is really foreseeable, nothing's predictable. And in that way, it's fantastic because not only is it unpredictable, it's also highly realistic. Oftentimes with shows, when shows are very realistic and grounded in reality, it's easier to see what's going to happen because, you know, you've watched a ton of shows in the past, you've watched a ton of movies in the past. You can kind of get a sense as to how plots go down, how characters interact. In this show, however, the director does such a fantastic job of fooling even the most experienced filmgoers, even the most experienced show watchers. The twists and turns will completely blindside you. You'll never be able to guess what exactly went down. And in that sense, I really have to throw it up and give props to the director and writer of this show because the way that they stun the viewer with new information, with how situations go down, with how the mystery unravels is quite beautiful, and I haven't seen it done this well in quite a while. Beyond that, this mystery is such a fun mystery to solve. I mean, it's grisly, it's brutal, it's dark, right? So I don't mean fun in that sense, but I mean fun in that throughout the entire show, you get little clues and bits and pieces that you get to unravel yourself as Mare is unraveling them. You can just sit back and watch Mare as she solves this mystery and as she goes through and encounters all that she encounters, and that's fine. That you could totally do that. But this show also gives you the option to solve the mystery alongside her. You know, a lot of these clues, she figures out the answer a little bit later in the show, and so if you have a proactive mind, if you're thinking about it as things are going down, you can kind of piece together some of these clues yourself and make predictions as to who you think is caught doing all this. Make predictions as to how situations went down. Make predictions as to why characters acted the way they did. And then watch and see if you were right or wrong. And that keeps the show even more engaging, even more interesting. Really made it super fresh in my eyes. It's also fantastic to see a show where characters actually have very realistic outcomes and very realistic consequences. You know, there's a lot of shows where the main detective kind of steps over the lines and does whatever they want to solve the mystery. This is not that type of show. There are dire and real consequences to both Mare as the primary investigator, but also all the other characters as they engage with this mystery. And that's fantastic because this show really explores all those consequences and shows you that it's not as easy as it seems. And I'll get back to that in a second, but that's a big theme of this show, and I think they showed it really fantastically. This show also really doesn't rely on cliffhangers, which was refreshing because a lot of shows these days really use cliffhangers to keep you engaged. This show relies on pure mystery and pure intrigue. You know, if you lose interest in this mystery anyway through this show, you're gonna lose interest in the entire show altogether because it is not a fast-paced action mystery thriller. The show is very much grounded in reality. It's gritty, it's realistic, it's meant to really showcase what life in a small town and the life of a detective whose life is essentially falling apart. A detective who's going through the most difficult situations, whose home life isn't good, whose dating life isn't good, whose detective life isn't necessarily good, who's facing one of the most difficult mysteries in her life, who has an investigation in her past that's plaguing her. I mean, there's a lot riding on Mare, right? And you can feel that pressure, you can feel that pain. And that's truly fantastic because the director is able to showcase that through the screen, a feat that not all directors can accomplish. So it is worth mentioning, this show can be pretty slow. There are sequences where it's essentially dedicated to learning more about Mare and her life, learning more about the characters around Mare and their lives. Sequences that might not have the action and drama that you're looking for if you want a fast-paced mystery thriller, right? So you really have to get invested in the characters, get invested in the world, to stay invested in this show and to watch it all the way through. It's not that long, 7 episodes, an hour each. It's really not too much of a commitment. But again, it can drag down and can get slow. Those specific parts, to me, were some of my favorites because I love it when a director is able to build out a world this fantastically and build out a world this intricately to where you feel like you're living in Easttown. So I love those parts, learning more about these characters and learn more about their backstories and how they interact with each other. But if you're not a fan of that, if you really like the mystery to be solved and if you really like shows to just focus on the mystery and really for it to be an insane chase, this might not be the perfect show for you. That brings me to my next point, the characters. The characters in this show are A+. Every character is extremely well built. You can tell they're real characters. You can tell that they have real lives. I mean, if this was a documentary, I would not be surprised. First of all, Mare herself, I already mentioned before, but she's going through quite a lot. She learns so much and develops as a character, and we get the pleasure of going on that development journey with her. You know, we get to learn so much about life alongside her, and that's truly such an amazing opportunity, in my opinion. Beyond Mare, all the other characters are extremely well fleshed out. Everyone's 3D. No one's a character that's super stereotypical or super one-dimensional. Everyone's really well built and everyone interacts with each other in such engaging ways that every scene is fresh and unique and worth watching, in my opinion. Add to that extremely fantastic acting, both from Mare herself, Kate Winslet, but also from all the other characters. This show is a tour de force, I tell you. Finally, this show rounds it out with amazing directing, amazing editing, stunning score and sound work. I mean, you can really feel the small town of Easttown. If I woke up one day and I was living in Easttown, I feel like I would know all of these characters, all the interactions, I would totally understand who they are. I wouldn't need to re-meet all these characters because this show does such a fantastic job of introducing them to you and showing you what they mean, showing you what they prioritize, showing you why they act the way they do, that you're really gonna fall in love with the town, the characters. All in all, I give Mare of Easttown a 4 out of 4, as in 100% worth watching. This should be on your roster for shows to watch. If you like mysteries, if you like investigative thrillers, if you like shows that focus on world building and character building, this is definitely the show for you. I highly recommend checking it out. Let me know in the comments below if you have checked out Mare of Eastwood, if you liked it as much as I did or not. Other than that, like and subscribe if you like this type of content. And now we'll be moving on to the Parents Guide. So Mare of Eastwood is rated TVMA, and rightfully so. I mean, I described the situation and the plot to you already. That should give you insight as to the grittiness of the show and some of the content that is in the show. But nevertheless, in terms of violence, I give this show a 4 out of 5. There is a good amount of violence. Now, a lot of the violence is discussed, not necessarily seen. The murder itself is relatively brutal in terms of it's a young woman, very young woman, in fact. In addition to that, there are scenes where characters have brief shootouts that can be quite bloody and graphic. There's also discussions, heavy discussions about what might have happened to characters, discussions about what is currently happening to characters, discussions that can be very difficult and dark, you know, altogether. This mystery is not a light mystery. It's not one for younger audiences, most definitely. You're going to need to be okay with violence to watch this show. Following along with that, in terms of sexual content, I give this show a 4 out of 5. There's not much sexual content seen, necessarily. However, as I mentioned, same with violence, it's a lot of discussions, right? And it's pretty graphic sexual content in terms of implications as to what happened to characters. There's a lot of sexual threat, there are some sequences where characters discuss pretty horrible things altogether. Finally, there's sequences and situations that involve incestual relationships that are also graphic and can be very disturbing for viewers who are not used to that type of content. So altogether, if violence and sexual content is not your forte, this is definitely not the show for you. It's not too graphic in terms of what you see, but again, what you hear and what they discuss and what they imply is really where it gets pretty disturbing. Finally, in terms of language, I give this show a 4 out of 5. There is a good amount of language, primarily the F word, S word, and D word. They're used quite frequently. It's not necessarily pervasive in that it draws you out of the show. There's never really too much, but due to the nature of the mystery and due to the nature of these characters and the situations they go through, which can be quite impactful and quite dark and drastic, there is quite a bit of swearing. Again, if violence, sexual content, and swearing are not your forte, this is definitely not the show for you. It's definitely more on the graphic side, and altogether, this is definitely not a show for younger audiences. So as I said before, let me know in the comments below if you have checked out Mare of Easttown, if you liked it as much as I did, or if you have any critiques or comments. And until next time, I'll catch y'all later.